Hello, New Hope and friends. This is the online sermon for May the 15th, 2022. I'm obviously recording on my back porch where the birds are very active at this time of night, and hopefully they'll behave enough that we can get this done. And I'm also obviously wearing a hat. Uh, I asked my wife, I said, can I do the sermon with a hat on? And she tends to know when I'm being lazy, not wanting to take a shower, and when I'm trying to be expeditious because I've got a lot of things to do. And so she said, yes, you can wear your hat. So it must be the expeditious thing, not the lazy thing, for me to be in hat. And it is, if you will notice, a very good hat. I have a simple question for you this morning, maybe simple. How does anybody tell who the Christians are today? How do you know Jesus' legit disciples? How can I know you're one, a Christian? How can you know that I'm one? And what standard of measurement would you use to determine that? The word disciple, literally, that's my granddaughter Quinn's favorite word. The word disciple literally means follower. And as long as Jesus was on earth, it was sort of obvious who the disciples were. Just see who is around Jesus. These were by definition disciples, followers of his. But after Jesus' physical time on earth, it gets a little bit more complicated. Think through with me some of the standards now that people will occasionally use to identify who the Christians are and who the Christians are not. A lot of folks would say that a Christian is created by a decision of faith expressed either through a prayer or through the act of baptism. A Christian is one who publicly claims the status. Some of those would even say that this moment of decision seals the deal. One gets irrevocably Christianized, right? We'll know who belongs to Jesus by that event. Some would identify true disciples of Jesus in terms of dogma or belief. A Christian is one who subscribes to the right set of doctrines, the Heidelberg Catechism or the Westminster Confession or the Chicago Statement for Evangelicals and so on. So it is purity of belief that will tell you. Others might put the emphasis more on communal attachment, or technically you might say ecclesiology, church attachment. That's how we know. Who are those who really belong to Christ? Well, Christ's body on earth is the church, so that's the way to know that somebody is Christian, by determining whether they have membership in a church. And some people would make even the connection to the previous doctrinal criterion and say that the right kind of church needs to be a part of this too. So that's a way. Some would go with that basic start, but just raise the standard a little bit. Well, a true disciple is not simply one who appears in a membership database somewhere, but rather a person who is active, a contributing organ in the body of Christ. We should be able to tell who's Christian and who's not by their worship and their service habits. I'm sort of a historical and theological guy in my approach to these kinds of things, so I might mark the boundaries of for the label Christian sacramentally. And sacrament, in this case, for me, just means the way that God uses ordinary matter, like the water of baptism and the bread and the wine of the Lord's Supper, to constitute a community of faith, to incorporate and grow people in Jesus. So Christians are those from all ages and from whatever places that have been brought together by baptism and have been fed regularly at Christ's table. Baptistry and table. That's the best litmus test for true discipleship. Somebody else would come back at me and say, wow, what are you, a Catholic or something? True discipleship is not found in religious ritual, but in purity of behavior. Christianity is an ethic. Show me somebody who keeps the biblical commands of God, who adheres to principles of decency and avoids self-destructive habits, and I will show you a true follower. Today, we probably have to throw politics into the mix, right? We'll know they're Christians by how they vote. And what's funny about that is that there are conservative and progressive versions of that oppose each other. A few years back, we shared inter-church pitch-in fellowship meals with our friends at Second Baptist Church, a predominantly African-American congregation. And those were fabulous, by the way. We need to get back to that, I was thinking. Well, of course, whenever people sit down to eat burgers and potato salad, there's a chance that politics is going to come up. And after one meal, fellowship meal, A New Hope, and I don't even remember who it was now, came up to me and they said, you know what, I don't think they vote like we do. Now my first thought was, what you mean we, Kimo Sabi? Because I know there's some variety at New Hope and people's political philosophy. And also there was likely some diversity in how they vote. But I'm sort of default sarcastic. So I said, so you're telling me that the local chairperson of the NAACP at that time doesn't vote a straight Republican ticket? I'm shocked. Well, politics is regularly presumed an easy standard for figuring out who belongs to Jesus and who doesn't. I'm just not sure it works very well. So that's just a sampling of some of the common standards that we use for identifying who's worthy of the label Christian. Just pay attention to the way conversations unfold around you, and I think you'll regularly hear versions of these methods of discerning, identifying who are the Christians. Now you probably noticed by now that I have intentionally withheld our gospel reading from you until now so that I can get some of those things I just mentioned on the table. Today's reading is from John chapter 13, which is a major turning point in John's story of Jesus. Just a sort of flyover summary of the first half of John's gospel. Chapter 1 is John's famous prologue. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, identifying Jesus as God's divine Word made flesh. Wonderful prologue to John. And then chapters 2 through 12 are often called the Book of Signs. Signs is John's word for Jesus' miracles. But what those chapters give us are the miracles and teachings of Jesus that show how God is bringing new life into the world through Jesus. And it is in this part of the story that Jesus calls disciples and starts training them for this new kind of life that he brings. But chapter 13 is, as I say, a turning point in John's gospel, as Jesus starts to wrap up his work on earth in preparation for the cross and beyond. Several times in the next couple of chapters after John 13, Jesus tells his followers that he is running out of time, something that they did not want to hear. And then against the background of a ticking clock, his teachings get more urgent at this point and more focused. No long parables for the disciples to reflect upon, time to bring all the threads together and to get to what matters most. Which brings us to our gospel reading today, John 13, beginning with verse 31 through 35. When he was gone, and we'll come back to that in a moment, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will glorify the Son in himself and will glorify him at once. My children, I will be with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and just as I told the Jews, so I now tell you, where I am going, you cannot come. A new command I give you. Love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another." Okay, here's how people will know that you belong to me, Jesus says. By your love, by the way you love each other. By the way we love each other. Jesus seems to bypass an awful lot of important stuff, doesn't he? I mean, a lot of the stuff that I mentioned earlier, it matters, right? Confession and baptism, wouldn't want to erase that from the picture. And the sacramental life of the church, my baptism and Lord's Supper qualifier, I think historically that is a very good way of tracing Christianity through time. If belief and doctrine, dogma doesn't matter at all, then I've wasted an awful lot of my life. And certainly corporate worship and service matter too, don't they? And good living, that's part of the mix, right? A lot of these things are not unimportant. And I would say that there are probably ways to see Jesus' love commandment in some of those ways that we use to identify who's in and who's out. But at this point in this story, with time running out in John's gospel, Jesus thinks it is best to let love rise sort of like cream above everything else and be made the focus. It's as if Jesus is saying, you've learned a lot of stuff, my apprentices, but the great guiding command that I put above all that I've taught you is this one: love one another. Get this right. By this one thing, more than anything else, you will show that you belong to me. I sort of imagine one of the disciples, Simon Peter, maybe looking over the crew that is gathered around Jesus. That's the one another that's there, the ones that he's to love, and saying, if you'll excuse me for just a moment, I sort of see this going poorly. Surely there's an option B. How about, by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples because you wear the I Follow Jesus t-shirts that Barnabas had printed up for us. How about that? Or everyone will know that we are disciples because of our olive wood cross necklaces that we purchased down at the Christian bookstore. Or because we have memorized and confessed the Nicene Creed, which won't be written for a couple hundred years, but we'll recite it when it gets here. Or they'll know we are Christians by our tithes or our worship attendance, but this love one another thing, just look at us, Jesus. Do you know how hard we are to love? Oh, Jesus knows. He spent 3 years with these guys. He knows how hard-hearted they are, how slow they are to get things. He knows they are fickle friends who will disappear in a crisis. He knows they are prone to fear. He even knows that their company is tainted by one who would sell him for silver. Did you notice in our reading this morning the line, when he was gone, verse 14? Some of you know this story well enough to know who the he is in this story. It's Judas. Judas, a follower of Jesus from pretty much the beginning, in the Lord's company for 3 years, important enough to be the group's treasurer. Well, he has, by this point in the story, already conspired to give Jesus over to his enemies. He is one of the reasons why Jesus' time on earth is running out. Jesus knows who his followers really are, but despite their imperfections, Jesus has mercy for them and loves them. It was just before the Passover festival here, and we're including Judas, I would have to imagine. I can't think that Jesus ever stopped loving Judas. I think Judas died because Judas couldn't love Judas. John sort of says that much. Chapter 13 starts off with John saying, Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. He loved them to the end. And then John reports that final meal that Jesus had with his followers, at which Jesus surprised everybody by getting up, taking off his cloak, wrapping a towel around his waist, taking up a basin of water, and then getting on the floor to wash his disciples' feet. A master washing the dirty feet of the apprentices. This is just completely upside down. It's inappropriate to social conventions of the day. Certainly odd if Jesus knows that there's a traitor in their midst, and John says that he does. I'm assuming even that the feet of Judas were among those washed by Jesus. Just think about that. In the course of the meal, Judas senses that Jesus is onto him. He's the one who leaves. And then Jesus gives them the new commandment to love, the action by which they will be known. New commandment. Wait a minute. This love is not a new thing. All religions highlight love. Judaism certainly speaks of love. Even atheists talk about love. How can Jesus speak of love as the new command? I think what Jesus offers is love that is new in extent. Love in a completely new flavor, you might say. In John's Gospel, the new commandment, the love commandment, is personified in Jesus himself. First, as he comes to the earth that he created, comes in the flesh to take up residence therein, to take his place beside us. In chapter 3, John famously summarizes that God so loves the world that he gives his son. The kind of love we're talking about is giving love. Jesus then pours himself into the sick people and disenfranchised people who have nothing to offer to him. His is not a romantic love, nor is it simply love that is being nice, nor is it loving only those who can love you back. It is love by choice. It is hard work. It is self-emptying and sacrificial. By John 13, our reading today, love brings Jesus to his knees to wash feet, and just a few chapters after that, love leads Jesus to the cross. And Jesus says this is how we should be recognized, by how we love. A couple of interesting anecdotes from early Christian history, one negative, one positive. A 2nd century letter called Second Clement points out how detrimental is an absence of love among Christians. Clement reports this. He says, when they, the non-believers, see that we not only do not love them that hate us, but not even them that love us, they laugh us to scorn, and the name is blasphemed. If you can't love yourselves as a church, the world ain't going to listen. Tertullian, on the other hand, tells how Christian love was noticed by outsiders. He says, it is our care of the helpless, our practice of loving kindness, that brands us in the eyes of our opponents. Only look, they say, how they love one another. Nice statement there. I think absolutely one of the goals of my ministry at New Hope, one of my goals is that we would be known for love, both in the way that we love each other, also in the way that we love everyone. And I would hope for you to be identified by others primarily because of the way you love, to be identified as Christian because of the way you love. I was thinking of some of those identifiers that I mentioned earlier, and how it is possible with a lot of them to still end the sentence poorly. And I'll show you what I mean here. Many considered Marvin to be a Christian by his lifelong impeccable church attendance, but he did beat his wife and kids. You have the one good part, but it doesn't necessarily end well. Wanda was a fabulous student of Scripture who knew the words of creed and catechism by heart, but people avoided her at all costs because of her annoying conceit. We knew Harvey was Christian because he gave the church way more than his tithe, year after year. But he was quite a jerk, so everyone agreed. And so on. You can do it with a lot of those. But here's the thing. I don't think you can do the same thing with genuine Christ-formed love, right? The sentence has to end well. She loved everyone in a self-sacrificial and heartfelt way, but nothing, right? Seems like that is a sentence that has to end well. So, it's tombstone-worthy stuff there, right? So this week, I think, try to look at yourself from the outside. How would you be viewed? Are you identifying yourself with Jesus in how you love people? Is that what people see when they look at you? Do they see the love of Jesus in the way that you love? I don't know exactly what that will look like for you. I'd like to tell you that you should go out and start literally washing people's feet, but I suspect that you'd get arrested for doing something like that. That may be a kind of assault if you try it. But find your own way to be Jesus. Have a great week.